Made in Abyss is a hard show to talk about. Its combination of Ghibli natural beauty with graphic injuries tends to polarize discussion, as does the source material's author, who almost certainly is not allowed within 200 meters of a school. I'll defend the first season to my deathbed, but left the follow-up movie feeling distinctly mixed. Eventually I started in on the second season, and what I found was frustrating, to say the least. That first season is something magical. Almost every aspect of its production is breathtaking, and applied to a remarkably original setting. Made in Abyss has something nobody else is offering, and God does that first season do it well. As I said, it's not perfect. The mid-season tonal heel turn isn't for everyone, and the troubling sexualization of children is there from the get-go. It doesn't serve a purpose, and while some of it can be put down to cave raiders just being culturally more matter-of-fact about things, at the end of the day we pretty transparently have these digressions because the author wants to take periodic breaks to talk about this boy's genitals. I will say it's often perfunctory and played for comedy. The camera doesn't seem to be leering at these kids, and during my rewatch of the show, it often moved on faster than I remembered. There is also a fascination with pissing, which to my eternal dismay we are going to have to put a pin in for later. It's there, it's bad, but it's not a fatal blow as it is in some other notable cases. It's an occasional digression that's pretty easily memory hold when it's sandwiched in between all of this. What a sense of wonder this show has, of exploration. Beautifully rendered landscapes, alien and enticing. Our heroes feel small, lost far afield in this wilderness, always pushing forward to the next vista. And violence is waiting for them around every corner. Each new creature is a potentially lethal threat with some novel form of predation. Even with luck, planning, and some of the best equipment available, these kids are at damn near the bottom of the food chain. They stumble into one bad fight halfway through and it almost kills them, decisive action allowing them to escape merely maimed. Then, because they're in a completely alien environment, the poisoned wound almost costs a limb anyway. JoJo's injuries, these are not. The graphic violence here is serving a purpose to drive home that this is an environment that wants to do violence on your body and will kill you if you give it the chance. I want to specifically dispel one particular misconception that I see, that Made in Abyss is on a philosophical level just torture porn. 13 episodes of mashing up kids' bodies for kicks with the top priority of driving home that anyone can and will die at any moment. Made in Abyss is actually a deeply sentimental show. You still feel that danger, but it's a product of zero tone armor and some truly remarkable vocal performances. Made in Abyss actually twists its narrative in favor of its characters, bending its world towards satisfying endings and narratives. That's the purpose of all that graphic violence, to ensure that your suspension of disbelief isn't even tested by all these cop-outs. On my first viewing, I didn't even realize the degree of raw sentimentality and authorial cowardice on display here. And I don't mean that as a bad thing, this is good writing. Sure, on a technical level they just got Deus Ex Machina, but it doesn't feel that way because, Jesus Christ, just look at her. There's more to be said about Season 1, but I'm not going to, because you should watch it, and I'm not even going to chance spoiling its most effective moments. So, here's where we stand. Not perfect, but an easy 10 out of 10. Pros? Incredible design, periodically fantastic music. I'm gonna give nature its own entry. A compelling mystery, stellar vocal performances. A lot of people forget about the beginning, but these kids are cute, and they're having orphanage hijinks. There's most of a Ghibli movie just stapled onto the front here. Cons? Author stops occasionally to ogle kids, though the camera abides rather than indulges it. Extreme graphic violence and body horror, though not without narrative purpose. I should stress I'm only putting something up here if it is a defining feature of the show. Most works get 2 or 3 entries top, and plenty would have none. Made in Abyss is a masterpiece, and you should watch it now, unless one of its 2 cons is a specific deal breaker for you. Next is the movie, and the movie is better than I remembered. The production is still great, the music is good. We do explore some excellent landscapes, though the vast majority of the movie occurs in and around this one location. In exchange for spending so much time in the concrete bunker, we do get to see more of Bondrewd, the most compelling character the show has. Made in Abyss was never really about people, but the relationship between Nanachi and Bondrewd is the best it has to offer, and it is a compelling enough hook to sustain a movie. The show also takes a newfound interest in fight choreography. Bondrewd is an absolute joy to watch in action scenes, and the movie has far and away the best fights of the series. While I do have to dock points for what will unfortunately become a regular reliance on bullshit power-ups, the most important fights of the series are won with resourceful tactics, so it's hard to be mad at the end result. Meanwhile, on the con side of things, the uncomfortable sexualization of children is still there. It's not acutely worse or better, and it doesn't feel like the show is dwelling on it, but man are these scenes gross viewing them in isolation while editing. More of a problem is the gore and body horror. For the movie, it starts to become gratuitous and solidifies itself in the cons column. The first season used graphic injuries as a counterbalance to paper over its narrative maneuvering in service of having its storytelling cake and eating it too. Here in the movie, it starts to seem like the body horror itself is the point. No matter how much the narrator tells you that the abyss gives all and takes all, the movie is more of a machine whose output is child suffering. I'm still not sure I've entirely figured out why the movie doesn't quite hit the mark on this. A big part of it is probably that the linchpin in all this is Prushka, the world's most obvious and shallow lamb to the slaughter, and maybe the weakest character in the entire show. The delivery of Prushka's story is a crime against narrative structure. The movie does basically zero work setting her up, only to dump her entire mediocre backstory on us right after she dies. I cannot imagine a worse way to structure this story. It is cheap, it's wildly ineffective, and it forced me to suppress a desire to just go right back in after and recut the movie so that Prushka is our initial framing device and we actually have time to get invested. It is baffling. On the other side of things, Bondrewd is truly excellent. If your show is going to be about characters, those characters have to pull their weight, and Bondrewd is more than up to the task. What ideology could possibly motivate someone committing these atrocities with genuine paternal affection? Trying to figure him out kept my attention for the full runtime and beyond. He might not be expressive enough on his own, but Nanachi is there to hold up her end of the parent-child dynamic, and the total package works.
Nanachi. さあ顔を上げてどうか君たちの旅路にあふれんばかりの
I mean, hell, this guy just cracked the code. He's figured out how to render people immune to the curse. I'm not gonna play defense for his experimental ethics, but the first surgeries were basically just whacking people with sharp rock, and now that we know love is the key here, all sorts of new avenues open up. Bondrewds can't serve as affective donors, but can receive the blessing, so you know I'm throwing an old dog in there, or an adventurous kid and their consenting grandpa. What I'm saying is, I can be trusted with children, and you should definitely fund me. So, let's take stock again. The design is still good. The music's good, but doesn't periodically take center stage like it did in Season 1. Stakes are technically still high, but we don't really care anymore because of the bad writing. Nature takes a back seat, and the bunker we spend our time in isn't nearly as interesting. There's no compelling mystery. We already know Bondrewd is sketchy because he was doing the exact same shit in the last arc. What do you think Bondrewd is gonna do to this kid, guys? Do you think is he gonna take good care of it? Is he gonna be a good father figure? Cast your votes below. I do think the character dynamics improve enough in Season 2 to make the list. Now, on the cons side, we have more graphic violence. This time, it is gratuitous, no longer serving a real point. We see it coming from a million miles away and don't really care when it happens. It actively diminishes investment and stakes. Kids are still getting weirdly sexualized. It's not, like, worse than the first season, but I don't think it's better. So, yeah, the movie is not as good. It's got good elements, to be sure, but the best parts of the show are absent or stunted, while the worst have persisted or deteriorated. The writing was unobtrusive before, not necessarily a strong point, but now it's actively getting in the way of things. I'm not sure the movie is good media anymore. Should you watch it? I don't know. But we move on. Season 2 brings us to a new layer, to summit new vistas, and to spend the entire season in one tower. We open with a random kid getting tortured, so far so Made in Abyss. Unfortunately, Season 2 quickly falls into the same trap as the movie, but far worse. Spending a grand total of 1 episode exploring the new layer, and then the next 4 hours in this one town and its backstory. We're no longer really afraid of the environment. Riko almost dies right at the start, and the others barely blink. Heights and navigating the environment were given serious weight in Season 1, but a fatal fall is barely a footnote here. The Curse of the Abyss is gone for so much of the runtime that characters forgetting about it is an in-text plot point. Each new predator used to be a seriously impactful threat, but not only are none of them super interesting here, but by the end of the season they're being waved around by the plot as a disposable CGI army, somehow coordinating a whole-ass invasion of rabid raccoons? Nanachi makes a remark about them being attracted to the village scent. It's still kinda bullshit. Bottom line, this guy isn't interesting, and I don't care about him. They even retroactively pull one of their best punches from Season 1. Remember that character arc that we resolved really well? Well, we're opening it back up again, so that we can close it again in a less impactful way this time. The sexualization of kids is a little better here, but the other weird fetish bits are regrettably some of the most obtrusive they have ever been. The author seems to be developing what we shall politely call a fascination with the scatological, and it gets in the way of the story. The very first scene with our heroes is an elevator ride just long enough for Riko to have a dedicated pooping scene. Mysterious stranger doing weird things? She's stuffing things up animal butts. Riko getting sick in the new city? Well, more pooping scenes. Make sure to note that it was licking her the whole time. A surprisingly tense moment highlighting the alienation and danger of this foreign city. Well, the animal's conveniently indestructible, but you better believe we prolapsed its anus. Settlers getting sick in a flashback? Oh boy, it is time to touch the diarrhea. It's gratuitous, it's off-putting, and most importantly, it warps the narrative and even the pacing sometimes in a way it did not in Season 1. There's a whole complicated plot with all these people. It's not bad, but it's not strong enough to carry an entire season. It's actually really similar to the dynamic with Bondrewd and Nanachi, except that it's less interesting and is being asked to hold our attention for more than 2 movies worth of runtime. Back in Season 1, we had another comparable arc, and we put a bow on that in 3 episodes. Find outpost, meet weird people, exploit kid, discover horrifying truth, move on. We weren't moving forward geographically, but we still had regular discoveries that expanded the setting or progressed the main narrative, and more importantly, it didn't last 4 hours. This is also the most people we've seen in the Abyssal Depths. The sense of wilderness and exploration is completely lost now, instead retreading cliches from vacation movies? I'm sorry, but getting a stomachache from the hostel's food and trying to barter in a foreign language is just not what I'm coming to Made in Abyss for. If I wanted that, I'd be watching My Big Greek Vacation or something. The mysteries of the show are barely progressed in this season. We get at most some new hints on Reg's origin. Season 2 is instead spent resolving plot points it itself introduced, with an ever stronger reliance on tormenting children. At this point, we've done the blank was actually little kids all along bit like 4 times in a row. The Hollows and Nanachi, Bondrewd's power briefcases, the White Whistles, and now this town. By the time the eggs come along and just so happen to only work on children and transform them into horrible Cronenberg monsters, we'd be more surprised if this mysterious town didn't used to be some kid.
First time.
Made in Abyss seems to think it only has 1 card to play when there's a royal flush sitting right there. I mean, come on! Remember how I said in the movie it started to seem like the narrative was being bent toward raw suffering itself instead of impactful stories? Well, in Season 2, that transition is complete. I cannot stop seeing stuff that doesn't make sense. And all we get in exchange is more suffering. What the heck does Belaf want with Riko's organs? Why put Nanachi to sleep forever? Is value something decided by the owner or the village? How the fuck did they write an economy without accounting for labor? Is something gone forever when it's converted into coins, or can the village create anything from thin air if you have enough of them? Why don't people just fucking talk to each other? A language barrier isn't brain damage. More than anything, these voids of in-universe justification show the author's hand. Belaf wants Riko to dismember herself because, that's kind of a fucked up plot development, yeah, right? Value is decided by whatever the author wants it to be. Things are simultaneously gone forever and easily replaced depending on what the scene demands. People don't talk to each other because then we couldn't stretch the plot and atmosphere for 12 whole episodes. Human children are valuable because this whole fucking show runs on human children now. The character dynamics are okay in Season 2. These two are just less interesting versions of Bondrewd and Nanachi. People's suffering feels transparently produced and instrumentalized, a product of authorial gamesmanship rather than authentic mistakes. Belaf is left suicidally guilty after eating these little guys, and I'm just sitting here wondering why. Am I a psychopath? What am I missing here? The alternative is death, and they expire on their own in like 12 hours, my dude. Midi's suffering isn't itself compelling, it tells us things about Bondrewd and Nanachi. Irumyuui, meanwhile, we don't even know if she's still in there. If she's conscious in there, she's certainly not in a normal mental state, she just exists to suffer now. I see YouTube comments quoting this scene like, oh, it's so meaningful, it's so tragic, and is it? If you think this is compelling, wait until I tell you about the Christian hell where you suffer eternal alienation from omnibenevolence. We've solved storytelling. This is nothing. You've been fooled. You've been had by Kevin Penkin. I don't want to reduce good writing to how well it translates to a morality tale diagram. I can, but that's a reductive question. A better one might be, how do we distinguish nuanced messaging from random authorial bullshit? Unfortunately, that question doesn't have a definitive answer. Pretty much the only evidence you can point to are contradictions in framing, and even then they can still just be more nuanced writing. This dude is constantly being framed as mega sinister, yet when we look at where the story eventually settles, he's basically completely vindicated, both in text and externally. So, is this the author playing with framing, or are they throwing a bunch of charged bullshit at the audience in the hopes they're too emotionally concussed to ask any questions? That's gonna come down to your own personal narrative buy-in at this point, and it should be pretty clear by now which side of the spectrum I fall on. Nanachi's guilt feels authentic because it stems from mistakes she made when she had good alternatives, to stay with Bondrewd even after his betrayal, to help him with his experiments. Even her hints of survivor's guilt in seeking the abyss and trusting Bondrewd in the first place feel real because it's neither the center of her character nor legitimized by the narrative, which here straight up just tells all these guys that yes, you should have died back then.
You should kill yourself now.
It feels like bullshit because the narrative is setting up these conditions itself and then condemning the settlers for making the only decision it would allow them. These people are getting philosophically branded for decisions made at authorial gunpoint. This isn't telling us anything meaningful. The point is to just sit here watching these people suffer and feel... What? You tell me. I mostly felt bored and kind of irritated. Something's been lost along the way. Made in Abyss back in season 1 wasn't just a horror show about a giant pit that lures people in to do terrible things to them. There was genuine beauty here, moments of wonder and tranquility that let you understand why people would continue plunging further into the earth. The show wasn't lying when it said the Abyss contained wonder and horror in equal measure, but by season 2 that balance has become tremendously lopsided. And, I don't know, maybe that's the point, that it was all a lie, that the Golden City whose rumors lured this crowd of people here doesn't exist. But local Abyss turns out to be evil, actually, is fundamentally less interesting and impactful than what we started with. The show insists that both sides of the scale are still here, that there's a light that can only be found in true darkness, but that's some bullshit. The narrator's philosophizing has always been pseudo-intellectual nonsense. That balance was true in season 1, not because the show said so, but because we saw it ourselves and believed the evidence of our own eyes. That said, I still actually like Made in Abyss, right there at the end of season 2. Watching that last scene, I was smiling. I was excited to see more of these guys, as the last several hours of filler were quietly moved to my brain's recycle bin. Fapata's a good character, some of her emotional bits do land. Her relationship with Robodad is probably the most effective character element in the entire season, and while it takes us like 2 full hours to get to her arc, she is especially strong interacting with Reg. They're cute. I liked the feral girl robot boy dynamic. She makes the show's sexualization less bad since around her it gets played for humor more effectively. And while I hate to make vibes-based arguments, her flirting with Reg feels less like the author awkwardly marionetting the narrative toward naked kids and more like an authentic pseudo-romance between pseudo-adolescents. Look, what can I say? It's cute when she climbs on him, come on. Actually, come to think of it, I had a crush in middle school on this girl who used to climb on and bite me. Let's not think too hard about that. Long story short, I left season 2 mentally discarding 90% of it, but still excited to see what comes next. We are running out of Abyss layers, but we've seen before that single layers can have diverse locales. I like these characters, and the mysteries the story has been setting up from the start have enough potential to make up for later exploration.
Fapta will not forgive villagers. You glared at us with hungry eyes.
What?
Your mouths. You speak it.
She's talking, right? Hey, you're gonna have to speak up or... Oh, she's coming over here. Ah, fuck! So, how can we fix season 2? Well, we're gonna need to take a hatchet to the runtime. This needs to be like 6 episodes tops. Every conversation about the cultural nuances of value, gone. I like the linguistic scenes, but gone. Half the fight scenes, gone. Specifically the CGI monster army and much of the fight between Fapata and the villagers. Any plot point that could be found in a mid-budget vacation comedy, gone. The complicated, contradictory feelings between Fapata, the villagers, and her mother, not a plot hole, but it is a layer of complexity that takes up way too much screen time and mental space. The gang arrives on layer 6, meets a mysterious stranger who seems to know Reg. She flees, the gang explores the lair and finds a weird village. They continue to investigate. Reg goes to get the Fapata-Reg backstory and whatever the fuck mystery you're clumsily setting up in this scene. Team Rico and the audience find out through contemporary accounts that the village was made through sketchy means that don't sit well with everyone. Don't show us hours of exonerating flashbacks demonstrating how absolutely necessary those actions were. You're creating needlessly complicated moral calculus that even the story seems to lose track of, and offsetting responsibility from the characters onto the author and environment. Literally everyone in text agrees that it was kinda necessary and kinda fucked up. Job done. Fapata finds her way inside, maybe Robo-Dad smuggles in an enemy that Reg will have to use his hand cannon on. Fapata starts massacring the villagers, Team Rico intervenes. They fight to a standstill, Fapata's still with the upper hand on account of the whole immortal princess thing. She turns to continue her rampage, only to find that the villagers have all come forward voluntarily to offer themselves up, to redeem their exploitation of Fapata's mother and fulfill their original dream of adventure by joining her in spirit instead of stagnating in their gilded cage forever. Fapata backstory and the important parts of her complexity accomplished, and so she sets out to find what else the world has in store for her. Obviously, there's a lot I'm glossing over. I mean, this shit's easy when you don't have to actually write the damn thing. We need to keep Robo-Dad in there somewhere, but there isn't an obvious place for a noble sacrifice. Maybe he intervenes to save Rico and by extension Fapata's future in this version too, but the ensuing fight proves fatal. That's the kind of story I want to see from Made in Abyss. Kinda fucked up, kinda sentimental, beautiful, weird, twisted bundle capped off with graphic violence. Another side story in the Abyss and another step closer to solving the mysteries at the heart of this whole thing. The ultimate fate of Made in Abyss will lie in whether it can move away from being shallow torture porn and pay off the legitimately compelling mysteries it's been setting up, along with hopefully a return to actually exploring the Abyss. Give us a reason to press further downward, show us that beauty and horror in equal measure that you keep promising. I really hope that the last arcs of this show can make Made in Abyss the flawed masterpiece it deserves to be, and not just a great first season that in the end couldn't match its own pace. Holy fuck, 40 minutes?!
こんなところで何をしてるんだ?
あれ?
That's right, Rico. You were born down in the depths. You could even say you were made in abyss.